Princess Paola di Castiglione, a woman of European nobility, shocked the world when she claimed to have been secretly involved with none other than Pope Francis for over a decade. Her stunning revelations, backed by private recordings and explosive photos, ignited a global scandal that the Vatican was desperate to suppress. But when Paola's apartment was broken into, her files destroyed, and her lifeless body found under suspicious circumstances, the world was forced to ask, was this just a tragic ending, or the beginning of a far darker conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of Vatican power? She called herself Princess Paola di Castiglione, though there was no official title that made her royalty. Her lineage traced back to obscure branches of European nobility, old money, old names, but little public attention. What set her apart wasn't her bloodline, it was her aura. Elegant, poised, and quietly powerful, she moved through Rome's elite social circles with the grace of someone who knew secrets others only guessed at. Few knew where she lived. Fewer still knew what she truly did. Yet she was seen at the most exclusive charity galas, front row seats at Vatican events, and high society dinners attended by cardinals and dignitaries. People whispered, speculated, and occasionally joked about her self-styled title as the Princess of Vatican City, assuming it was a branding trick for attention. They were wrong. Paola had grown up inside the church, not within its doctrines but its influence. Her mother had served as a diplomatic aide to the Holy See, and her father, a former Italian ambassador, had long-standing ties to influential clergy. From a young age, she was present at private masses and hidden corridors, attending dinners that never made headlines, and hearing sermons meant only for a chosen few. She was, in many ways, a product of the church's unseen architecture. Raised among whispered confessions, veiled transactions, and quiet power, she learned quickly that silence was currency, and she spent hers wisely. By her mid-30s, she had reinvented herself as a philanthropist, occasionally appearing on cultural panels about religious art and morality in modern Europe. Her public image was controlled, serene. The media painted her as a relic of old-world elegance, but behind the carefully arranged smiles and pearl earrings, something was always guarded. It wasn't until a cryptic post on a now-deleted blog hinted at a relationship between a woman of noble blood and a man of holy power that the first crack appeared. Most dismissed it as gossip. A few Vatican watchers took notice. And then, Paola disappeared from public view for nearly a year. When she returned, it was with a statement so shocking it shattered the illusion that had protected her for so long. She claimed to have been in a secret affair with Pope Francis, a relationship that spanned more than a decade. The claim was immediately dismissed as madness, but it came with proof. Proof no one was ready for. The world woke up to chaos on a quiet Monday morning. Italy's largest independent news network aired a shocking exclusive. A woman claiming to be the longtime secret lover of Pope Francis had come forward with physical evidence. The woman was none other than Princess Paola di Castiglione. Overnight, she went from a mysterious social figure to the center of the largest scandal the Catholic Church had faced in decades. She didn't appear in person. Instead, the network played a series of voice messages, showed photographs, and displayed scanned handwritten letters. Each piece of evidence was introduced with grave seriousness. The recordings, a woman's voice, confident, calm, unmistakably Paola's, spoke intimately about stolen moments, secret meetings, and emotional confessions. The letters, dated over several years, were signed simply Francesco. One of them ended with a line that sent social media into meltdown. "You are my light in the dark corners of my soul. Pray for me, but also wait for me." Beside the signatures were markings that matched the Pope's personal stationery, a sun-like symbol used in only his private correspondence. The photos that followed were grainy but disturbing. One showed a man resembling Pope Francis seated in a candlelit room, dressed casually, with Paola standing nearby, her hand on his shoulder. Within hours, the Vatican issued a denial. A press release from the Holy See called the claims malicious, fabrications, and deeply disrespectful to the sanctity of the papacy. They insisted the photos were doctored, the letters fake, and the recordings manipulated. But for many viewers, the damage had already been done. What made it worse was how calm and deliberate Paola's evidence seemed. She wasn't ranting or accusing. She was revealing. Not in anger, but with something that felt like truth. As reporters and commentators rushed to cover the story, religious leaders around the world fell into silence. Some suggested she was mentally unwell. Others believed she was being used to smear the church. Yet among ordinary people, particularly online, there was a growing sense that this might be real. Why would someone with so much to lose come forward like this? And why now? The Vatican scrambled to control the narrative, but one thing was already clear. Princess Paola had shattered the image of untouchable holiness, and she claimed there was more to come. Inside Vatican walls, panic set in. The moment Princess Paola's allegations aired, high-ranking officials convened emergency meetings, in private rooms behind locked doors. Not since the Vatileaks scandal had the Holy See faced such a public crisis. But this was different. This wasn't about financial corruption or internal politics. This was about the Pope himself. The spiritual leader of over 1 billion Catholics had been pulled into a deeply personal and potentially devastating controversy. The idea alone was unthinkable, and yet, the world was watching. Paola had promised more revelations. She hinted at unreleased documents, voice recordings, and even photographs taken in locations inside the Vatican not accessible to the public. Suddenly, the Vatican wasn't just trying to protect the Pope's reputation. It was trying to stop whatever was coming next. The Secretariat of State quietly began tightening security, both digitally and physically. Staff were questioned. Internal systems were scanned for leaks. A confidential task force was formed, led by members of the Vatican's own Gendarmerie Corps, tasked with tracking the origin of the leaks and monitoring Paola's movements. Outside the walls, media trucks lined the streets of Rome. Reporters camped out near the Vatican gates, trying to catch a glimpse of anyone coming or going. The church's most trusted spokespeople were unavailable for comment. For days, the Pope remained silent. No public appearances, no homilies, no blessings. It was as if he had vanished behind the marble and gold. Some said he was too ill to speak. Others believed he had been silenced. Meanwhile, Paola, staying in a private apartment near Piazza Navona, didn't shy away from the attention. Through her lawyer, she issued another statement, claiming the relationship had started in friendship, built through spiritual guidance, and eventually crossed boundaries no one expected. She insisted it wasn't about revenge, it was about truth, and she claimed she had been warned, more than once, to keep quiet. Her statements divided the world. Religious leaders condemned her. Critics called her a liar seeking fame. But others saw courage. Survivors of church abuse rallied behind her, saying she gave voice to secrets hidden too long. Online forums exploded with theories, many dark and wild, connecting her story to long-whispered rumors of Vatican cover-ups. But amid the noise, one thing was clear. This wasn't going away. The Vatican's walls may have been centuries old, but the storm brewing around them was unlike anything they had ever seen. Just as the media frenzy reached its peak, something happened that changed the tone of the entire story. In the early hours of a Thursday morning, Princess Paola's apartment in Rome was broken into. It wasn't an ordinary robbery. The intruder, or intruders, left no trace of forced entry. The door was locked when the building's doorman checked it that evening, and security cameras in the hallway had mysteriously gone dark for exactly 47 minutes, right during the suspected time of the break-in. When the apartment was inspected later, only one category of items had been targeted: documents, devices, and anything that could hold data. Her personal laptop, external hard drives, USB sticks, and a fireproof box that had been bolted to the closet floor were gone. Dozens of printed photos had been torn to pieces and flushed down the toilet. Her home safe was open, its contents completely cleared. Strangely, none of her jewelry, cash, or designer valuables were touched. Artwork remained in place. Even an envelope of cash on the kitchen counter was left untouched. Whoever came wasn't looking for valuables. They were looking for silence. The Roman police were called in, but from the start, the investigation felt restrained. There was little urgency, no public statement, and barely any follow-up. Officers noted the lack of forced entry and suggested it may have been someone Paola knew. But Paola herself told her lawyer something chilling. She believed it was professionals, people with the ability to bypass both locks and cameras. She said she had been followed twice that week by the same black car with Vatican diplomatic plates. News of the break-in leaked within 24 hours, sparking speculation that the Vatican was behind it. The theory was dismissed officially, but behind closed doors, insiders knew this wasn't far-fetched. It wouldn't have been the first time pressure had been applied to make a problem disappear. Paola, now fully aware of the stakes, became more cautious. She stopped appearing in public. Interviews were canceled. Her lawyer took over all communication. She reportedly moved to a new location under tight secrecy, telling friends that they were trying to erase the truth before she could release what she called the second archive. The message was clear. Someone wanted her story buried. But Paola wasn't backing down, at least not yet. Less than a week after the break-in, the story took a tragic and chilling turn. At dawn on a foggy Sunday morning, the body of Princess Paola di Castiglione was discovered in St. Peter's Square. A groundskeeper found her lying motionless near the edge of the colonnade, just meters from the Vatican's front steps. She was dressed in the same clothes she had been photographed wearing 2 days earlier, a black coat, silk scarf, and dark heels. At first glance, it looked like she had fallen from one of the nearby rooftops, and within hours, officials labeled her death a suicide. The Vatican issued a short statement expressing sorrow and calling it a deeply saddening loss. Italian. Authorities echoed the Vatican's conclusion, suicide by fall. But something didn't sit right. Those who knew Paola best described her as frightened, yes, but also fiercely determined. She had been preparing more releases, storing files off-site, and speaking to a foreign journalist about a major exposé. She was being careful. She had told her lawyer just the night before that she felt something was going to happen. But not by her own hand. The autopsy results raised even more questions. The coroner reported bruising on her arms consistent with restraint. More troubling was the presence of a rare sedative in her blood, one not easily found outside of medical or military circles. Her phone and purse were missing, as was a small pendant she was known to wear daily, containing a hidden micro SD card. And yet none of this was addressed publicly. The case remained officially closed. No press conference, no further investigation. Anonymous sources from within Rome's law enforcement community whispered that higher powers had intervened. One investigator was quietly reassigned days after requesting access to Vatican surveillance footage from the night of Paola's death. Another was warned to drop the case entirely. Her apartment, now sealed by police, was reportedly entered again, this time with no record of who authorized it. The world reacted with shock and suspicion. Online forums exploded. Supporters who had believed her story from the beginning now called her a martyr. Conspiracy theories grew louder. Was it suicide? Or a silencing? Had she been lured to the square? Had she tried to meet someone she trusted, only to be betrayed? Whatever happened in those final hours, one thing was certain. Paola had died just steps away from the very institution she once claimed to love. Cement. Before her death, Paola had entrusted him with a small, encrypted flash drive, instructing him to release it only if something happened to her. The contents were chilling. The drive contained scanned letters, handwritten diary pages, and a handful of voice recordings that shed new light on her claims, and painted a far more dangerous picture of what she had been caught up in. The files revealed she had been compiling evidence for over a year, ever since she realized her relationship with Pope Francis had shifted from deeply personal to politically explosive. She wrote about being followed, receiving anonymous threats, and having her phone tapped. She detailed how, in a quiet meeting with a Vatican official known only by initials, she was urged to let go of the past for her own safety. One recording in particular sent shockwaves through the few who heard it. A male voice, calm and authoritative, said, You don't understand how far this goes. You're standing in something that's not meant to be seen. Also on the drive were high-resolution scans of letters that had not been released before, correspondence that seemed less romantic and more confessional. Pope Francis appeared to express regret, not only for the relationship but for the danger it placed them both in. He wrote of enemies within the cloth and the weight of secrets that stretched back decades. The tone was fearful, not loving. One letter ended with, "Forgive me if silence is my only way to protect you." There were also photographs, never before seen, showing Paola inside private sections of the Apostolic Palace. These were not tourist-accessible areas. Some photos included background details, portraits, statues, and inscriptions that were only found in rooms reserved for the highest levels of Vatican leadership. Experts confirmed the authenticity of several images based on architectural features. The flash drive's discovery changed the tone of the story once again. What had once been dismissed as scandalous gossip was now looking more like a dangerous truth. If what Paola had uncovered was real, it pointed to a hidden network of power, silence, and control that went far beyond a forbidden relationship. Her death, once labeled tragic, now felt deliberate. Her archive wasn't just a record of love, it was a warning, one the world had nearly missed. As investigators began combing through the contents of Paola's hidden archive, a disturbing pattern emerged. Much of the data pointed not only to a relationship, but to long-term surveillance. Paola hadn't just been followed in her final weeks, she had been watched for years. Tucked within her files were photographs of herself that she claimed never to have seen before. Some were taken outside her apartment, others while she traveled abroad. There were even time-stamped images of her inside restaurants, seated with friends, completely unaware she was being monitored. Analysts traced metadata from some of the files to a private intelligence firm registered in Switzerland, but operating under the guise of a religious non-governmental organization. This firm, it turned out, had deep financial ties to various arms of the Church. Their name appeared in Vatican financial ledgers recently leaked by a separate whistleblower. Their work was listed cryptically under consultation and internal security. The deeper researchers looked, the more clear it became. This wasn't the work of tabloid journalists or obsessed fans. It was organized, funded, and sanctioned surveillance. Paola had clearly begun to suspect this. One diary entry described noticing the same man at 3 different events across 2 countries. Another referenced hearing a faint clicking on her landline, a sign she believed meant it had been tapped. She even noted her reluctance to use email, writing that the digital walls here aren't just thin, they're transparent. Despite her awareness, it seemed she underestimated how far it went. Among the most damning pieces of evidence was a long report, anonymously sent to her 6 months before her death. It outlined how high-risk individuals with Vatican ties were placed under what the report called soft containment, a program meant to manage, monitor, and if necessary, discredit or eliminate reputational threats. Paola's name was listed along with the label priority asset, compromised. When this information surfaced in investigative circles, the conversation shifted yet again. It was no longer just about Paola and the Pope. It was about a broader system, one that had the tools, resources, and reach to track anyone they saw as a threat. The public had thought of the Vatican as a place of prayers and rituals, but these files suggested another side, one hidden behind centuries-old walls and protected by centuries-old silence. Paola hadn't just been in love with the wrong man. She had wandered into the heart of a secret world that watched everyone and trusted no one. Just when it seemed the truth had reached its limit, a new piece of evidence emerged that threw the entire case into deeper darkness. An anonymous leak to an international journalist revealed the existence of a confidential Vatican report known as Motu Proprio 7.12, Confessio Secreta. The document, dated 3 months before Paola's death, reportedly outlined an internal investigation into a pastoral indiscretion involving the Holy Father. Though heavily redacted, the timing, phrasing, and references matched too closely with Paola's allegations to be coincidence. According to sources familiar with Vatican protocol, a motu proprio is a rare and powerful type of papal document issued directly by the Pope, often for matters considered sensitive or urgent. That one existed regarding this case, implying the Pope himself either acknowledged or sought to quietly resolve the situation, was explosive. But what made it more suspicious was what was missing. Multiple pages of the document had been deliberately removed. A note in the margin read, "Section withheld per direct order, Office of Apostolic Administration." Investigators couldn't trace the order back to any named official. The paper trail stopped at an office door that, according to public records, hadn't been staffed in over a decade. It was as if the section had been erased not only from the file, but from institutional memory. Experts who reviewed the remaining pages were stunned by the language. Phrases like spiritual compromise, external influence risk, and containment strategy appeared repeatedly. The wording was cold, administrative, and most notably, devoid of any pastoral concern. This wasn't a spiritual matter. To them, it was a crisis of image and control. Even more troubling was a brief mention of something called the Magdalena Protocol. Though never explained in the text, Paola had referenced that same phrase in her private notes. She believed it referred to a secret procedure for dealing with women who presented a threat to Vatican integrity, especially those with internal access. She had circled the term and underlined it 3 times in red ink. When the document leak became public, Vatican officials refused to comment. The press was met with silence. Some insiders claimed the document was fake, but those familiar with Vatican formatting, seals, and structure confirmed its authenticity. It hadn't been forged. It had been hidden. With every new discovery, it became clear that Paola's story wasn't just about forbidden love. It was about systems of secrecy, ones willing to alter, erase, and even destroy whatever threatened their foundation. As the world grappled with the latest revelations, the investigation into Paola's death entered a critical phase. The Vatican, determined to quash any further public relations damage, remained steadfast in their refusal to acknowledge the depth of the scandal. However, behind the scenes, tensions within the church reached a boiling point. The leaks were becoming too frequent, the questions too persistent, and the pressure on Pope Francis was growing unbearable. Rumors spread that senior cardinals, long loyal to the papacy, were now quietly distancing themselves from the Pope, fearful that this could be the scandal that brought down not only his papacy, but also the fragile trust that had been carefully cultivated within the Vatican. The fact that Paola's death was never fully investigated had been a point of contention from the start. Many believed the manner of her death, near the sacred grounds of St. Peter's Square, was a clear message. Yet, those with insider knowledge were beginning to suggest that Paola had been silenced not by her own hand, but by those within the Vatican who feared what she was about to expose. Some even speculated that her death wasn't a random tragedy, but part of a larger plan to stop her from going public with even more explosive material. In a surprising turn, a whistleblower from within the Vatican's own security team came forward. The individual, whose identity was kept secret for fear of retribution, revealed that the Vatican had long been monitoring Paola's activities ever since she first began speaking about her affair with the Pope. The whistleblower, who had worked in the Gendarmerie Corps, disclosed that several members of the Vatican police force had been tasked with intercepting Paola's communications and tracking her every move. The officer claimed that in the weeks leading up to her death, there had been an increased sense of urgency within the Vatican's internal security to control her narrative, whatever that narrative might be. As the details of Paola's surveillance unfolded, it became clear that she had become a liability to powerful figures within the church. Her alleged affair with the Pope, once an isolated scandal, had the potential to unravel something much larger, a vast network of secrecy, corruption, and power struggles stretching far beyond her personal relationship with Pope Francis. The evidence was there, piecing together a portrait of an institution willing to do whatever it took to protect its interests. Yet despite the mounting evidence, no one had the courage to confront the heart of the matter. The Vatican's silence was deafening. For many, it was clear that this was not just the end of one woman's story, but the beginning of a much darker chapter, one that was still unfolding behind closed doors. The truth remained elusive, and Paola's death would continue to haunt those who had chosen to ignore the warning signs. As the investigation continued to gain traction, the pressure on the Vatican intensified. Yet despite the mounting evidence and increasing public outcry, the Church's response remained steadfastly non-committal. With each passing day, it became clear that those in power were not simply trying to protect the Pope, they were fighting to maintain the integrity of an institution whose walls had been built upon centuries of secrecy. But the deeper the investigation went, the more fragile that foundation seemed. The public, too, had shifted in its perception of the Vatican. What began as an isolated scandal involving a single woman had now transformed into something much more profound. Paola's tragic death was no longer just the end of a life. It had become the symbol of a far-reaching web of manipulation, deceit, and cover-ups that extended deep into the heart of the Catholic Church. The more that came to light about the Vatican's internal operations, the more evident it became that the institution had been involved in not just hiding Paola's truth, but systematically erasing anyone who could expose it. In a final, devastating twist, an anonymous informant released a dossier to the international press. It contained records of internal Vatican meetings that had been held in the months following Paola's death. The documents showed that high-ranking officials, including cardinals, had been actively involved in discussions about how to suppress the scandal. The most damning detail revealed that some of these leaders had discussed the possibility of limiting the fallout by taking more drastic measures if Paola's revelations went public. The language in the documents was chilling. "No one outside this room can know the truth. If we fail to control this, it will be the collapse of everything we've built." The revelation of these internal communications caused an international uproar. For the first time, the Vatican's secrecy was not only exposed but documented, with names, dates, and explicit plans laid bare. The scandal was no longer about Paola's alleged affair or her tragic death. It was about an institution so powerful and entrenched that it had systematically manipulated its own narrative for centuries. The public began to question whether the Vatican, as an institution, could ever recover from such a devastating blow. And then, in an unexpected turn, Pope Francis made his first public statement in months. With the eyes of the world upon him, he admitted, not to an affair, but to the existence of a close and intimate relationship with Paola, one that had indeed spanned over a decade. His admission was the shock heard round the world, but what followed was even more telling. The Pope announced he would step down, acknowledging that his continued leadership would be a distraction from the Church's mission. He cited personal failings and the weight of the institution's crisis as his reasons for resigning, a move that left even his most devout supporters reeling. In the end, Paola's death was not just the loss of a woman silenced by a powerful institution. It was the catalyst for a reckoning. The Vatican was no longer the untouchable institution it once was. The truth, once carefully hidden in the shadows, had come to light, and there would be no turning back. What followed in the years to come would be a complete restructuring of power within the Church, as the world awaited what would come next for an institution forever changed by one woman's tragic story.